Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. Is there more pain? Yes. Is there more amazing writing? Yes. Should you read this series? Yes. Now let's talk about it. Hello, welcome to my channel. I am Pete. This is the Ponderings of Pete. Thank you for coming. If you are a new viewer, thank you so much. There is a like button, there is a comment button, there's a subscribe button if you really want to see more of me. If you have read this book, please leave a comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you read Grace of Kings, the first book, leave your thoughts. And if you are returning, hey, how you doing? Thank you for coming back. I appreciate all of your guys' supports. Please also leave comments, leave likes. I'm assuming you're probably already subscribed, hopefully, but nonetheless, all that jazz. Again, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Now is there anything else I have to talk about? No. All right, cool. Because I want to talk about this book. First up, this is going to be part non-spoiler, part spoiler. So I will tell you when I'm about to spoil things. aka I go into the spoiler section, but the first part of this video will be non-spoiler. So if you've read Grace of Kings, or you just want to watch the review for a second book for some odd reason, watch this first part of the video and then come back after you've read it. So let's do non-spoiler Wall of Storms. Needless to say, I really love this book. Did I love it more than Grace of Kings? I'm at odds, because I love Kuni Garu in Grace of Kings. He's one of my favorite characters of all time. And he is not as much in this book as he is in the first book. So I am very torn. I think it is a fantastic book. I don't know how I'd rank them currently. This book takes a lot of things from Grace of Kings. It tightens up some things, it starts focusing more, and it expands the world in a wonderful, wonderful way. I can't even tell you how they expand it, but it has something to do with the Wall of Storms for certain. There's that thematic stuff going on. This book is just great. Kuni, he's there. Jia, she's there. Risana, she's there. All your favorite characters from the last book that survived, they're there. And they're better. Jia is living her life in this book. I can't tell you how she's living her life, but she is so much. There's so much more to her in this book, as well as Jin. Like, she doesn't play the same role as she did in last book, and her just the exploration of her is so much more nuanced in this book. I felt like Jin had a lot less page time than she deserved in Grace of Kings, but it was just, that's how the story went. On top of the fact, Thera, and there's a new character, Zomi, two female characters that are amazing in this book, that are great at exploring very specific topics. One of the things that I read online was that some people didn't really like the female representation in Grace of Kings, considering there were only two female characters that were kind of major characters, and they weren't in it as much as they wanted them to be. And this book, like, just reverses that in spades. Not only do you have Jia, you have Jin, you have Thera, who is Jia's daughter, and you have another character, Zomi, who is introduced at the beginning of this book. These characters are amazing. So if that was your issue, it's not anymore. It shouldn't be. They're just amazing characters. On top of that, you have all the siblings, you have Kuni. It's just, there's amazing characters in this book. And the storylines are very, very thought-provoking and just awesome. I really love them. The one thing I will say is this book could use a more extensive cast of characters list at the front of the book. And I think the last book was 4 or 5 pages of cast of characters, and it was helpful because it told you which characters you didn't need to pay attention to. This book, there are several characters that I would consider to be major parts. Maybe even you could call them minor parts, but I was still confused who they were because they were from last book, but they weren't in the cast of characters because there was only like 3 pages. It was kind of annoying. However, there are some characters that are not in the cast of characters that I understand why they weren't, because reasons, but that's how it works. I did take a look at the next book, The Veiled Throne. Like, the cast of characters there is like twice as long. It's great. I'm not asking for like Malazan level of Richard, a guard. You don't need to do that in every book. In fact, in having certain characters in the cast of characters and descriptions of them would be spoilers for the rest of the book. But it's useful when there are characters from the last book that I don't remember that well, and having them at least in the cast of characters would be great. So that was kind of my one gripe with this that I can talk about in my non-spoiler section. I do have things that were kind of awkward, I felt, in the how things were played out. He does use miscommunication to a certain point in this book, but like the miscommunication is understandable, if that makes any sense. It's a miscommunication, or really lack of communication due to how society is more than anything. And that actually is like not only addressed, but like it's like, hi, we're literally talking about this. Like we know it's not like a book where it's like, oh, we're going to use this as a tension builder. No. It's used to offer questions up. It's used to be thought-provoking. The other thing that might be kind of weird about this book is there does feel like there is a lot of coincidences. Part of that is just how the story is told, and then part of that is also a result of the gods being the gods. I think that Ken Liu did a very interesting thing in the last book, and he continues it in this book in saying, look, there are a lot of coincidences. Are they the gods? Are they not? Who knows? Haha. And I think that's a really good convention to just weave into the narrative. It was really interesting. He does continue that. But I have heard from friends where the coincidences were annoying at one or two points to a certain extent. That's kind of it that I have for the non-spoiler. Thank you for watching. If you're going to jet away now, come back when you've read the book. I really hope you do. If again, comment down below. Talk to me. I like engaging with people, so yay. If you're not gone by now, and you should be because you haven't read the book, I'm going to give you like 2 or 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Let's talk some spoilers, shall we? Right. So, spoilers. So, with Wall of Storms, there is so much to talk about. And I actually was on a live show with a few other booktubers for Wall of Storms. It was great, and we talked about a lot of things. And I'm just going to use this section to talk about a few specific things, mostly relating to Cooney and his family. I think that's pretty much what I'm going to focus on, and then leave the rest of the stuff for other discussions. If you want to see us talking more, if you want to see me talking more, again, go to this discussion. I'm going to just go family member by family member with Cooney and his family so that I can talk about the things that I loved and hated with it. The first one, I'm just going to talk about Cooney because he's my favorite, and I want to talk about him. Cooney I felt like he was such a tortured man in this book. And he doesn't show up that much, so you don't constantly see it. But it's so interesting because Cooney's big strength is, I think I've said this in my last review for Crazy of Kings, his biggest strength is sitting down and talking to people. Like, he's such an honest and genuine person and an understanding person that he will talk things out and just understand and figure out the solution to the problem. But he's not able to do this here. He has to do something that is almost not familiar to him, which is politicking, which is building a system, which is actually building a good system. And this is something that's not familiar to him, but there are other people that are more familiar with it. And thus the system gets all interestingly out of whack. And specifically with Cooney, he has to listen to other people more. And this is almost a weakness, is because he's so understanding, it is easier for him to acquiesce to everybody else. He's like, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to go with you. It's fine. Cool. Do what you will. And that's not constantly what it is, but he understands his limits and his limits of knowledge. And so because he is too understanding of his own limits of knowledge, that tends to bite him in the butt a little bit. He's so almost shackled by the tradition and everything that he has created, that he has established through okay, let's take all these Anno things and decide what we should do with this, from the veil and all this other stuff. And the interesting thing is that the symbology of the veil, which I think is going to be continued in the next one, because Cooney is very good at having a veiled face, and he actually doesn't need the veil to be able to not show his emotions. But the veil actually prevents Cooney from being Cooney. It's not just a veil to it almost becomes a wall of storms. Not quite a wall of storms, that's completely different, between him and the rest of everybody. And one of the things that I really think would have been interesting if Cooney had actually sat down and talked to Gia, if he hadn't been like scared of her or whatever. I think him and Gia could have managed to eventually see eye to eye, and that Gia would have eventually been fine with Thera being on the throne, because it's still one of her kids. Like, gosh, it doesn't have to be the firstborn. But I think Cooney could have eventually made her see reason and, hi, we should totally break tradition. Tradition isn't that important, Gia. This entire theme continued, this veil in front of Cooney continued until his death, where his final words was literally him just being like, all right, look, I need to tell you guys something. There is my heir, all that jazz, fight till the death. Yay. He literally just couldn't take it off until the very end, which is so heartbreaking. I will say that his final moments were kind of a little annoying to me, because his final words felt like they would take 5 minutes to say, but it's like, hi, I'm like crippled from a gangrene in my foot, and I'm going to stumble over there, and no guards are going to stop me from talking over the speaking word, obviously. I felt like the Lyceum guards, like you, would have stopped him from speaking a lot sooner, but he got his whole thing out. But anyways, that's just a really minor gripe. I think I'm more okay with his death than I was when I first read it. I was kind of like, about his death to begin with. But I think the thematic thrust behind Cooney is really great. And I still love him as a character. Now, I'm going to deviate from what I originally said, and we're going to talk about the Great Examination. I thought the Great Examination was fascinating. I don't know why I did this next. But, and the way that Ken Liu used Zomi to illustrate the inherent injustice within the system of the Great Administration. Because it sounds great, right? Meritocracy. Yay. If you do good, you do good. But the fact that the essays were judged on creativity, which inherently means that lack of creativity is going to be awarded, because if you're judging on creativity, you are going to, judge things better because they're familiar to you, which is like the antithesis of creativity to a certain extent. And so you're just going to keep regurgitating the same ideas, etc., that you personally hold true. And then Zomi's like, you know what, I'm going to game the system because that's awesome, and give you an essay that tells you exactly what you want to hear, and I'm going to be like, look at what you've done. I loved it. I loved it a lot. It was awesome. And the inherent injustice of, look, hi, a vast majority of people that you want to be in these great examinations aren't going to be here because they're not afforded the opportunity to study all these things, because it takes years and years of study. I loved the Great Examination. It was fascinating. If you think that part was slow, I disagree highly. But I know this is personal because I was a good test taker in school. So as they were doing the Great Examination, I was like, I see what's going on here. There was a little bit of that going on with me. I kind of understood where he was coming from pretty early on. I was like, oh, this is great. This is cool. This is interesting. So gaming tests is something that I know how to do. I really, really love the Great Examination and the questions that it put forth. Next up, we are going to talk about Gia, who is everybody's favorite person to hate in this book, because Gia is really, really, really just mean. Is mean the right word? It's probably too weak of a word. I don't want to say the word that probably comes to most people's minds, but Gia was so well written in this book. I understood where she was coming from. She wanted stability, and I can understand that desire. That's a good thing to want. You want stability for the throne? That's some foresight right there. That's great. But the way she went about it is unforgivable. She got multiple people killed that I liked. Rin, Otho, Risana, which we'll talk about in a second. They died because of her. Some of them basically by her hand. And it's terrible. She got Jin thrown in prison. It was just... Talk things out. Just talk to Cooney, please. I feel like I can trust her to a certain extent in the next book. But only because I know what her intentions are. I know that she wants stability for the throne, so I know she's not going to screw up with Phiro. Like, like she's gonna do her best, and I wouldn't be surprised if she is portrayed as more sympathetically in the next book, depending. But also, her long-term vision gives her more short-sightedness than she realizes, specifically to the people around her, and it just walls her off in a way that isn't healthy. She's isolated herself so much, and I'm concerned for her, and I'm really not sure if I want to call her a villain or not. Because I know that she does have good intentions, but she's definitely a great antagonist in this book. So, amazing. Next up, I'm going to talk about Thera. Thera was great. Like, her just doing her own thing. That slow buildup of the power base, so to speak, that could have eventually supported her bid for the throne. It was great. I loved Cooney's plan, like, from the very beginning. Like, she honored her father, and her father was like, yes. I mean, not because she honored her father, but she's a good person, and she didn't have the flaws of the other. Is she a Mary Sue? That's an excellent discussion video question. The concept of her just being like, yeah, I'm just gonna go do these things, and she ends up being elbows deep in a dead cow dragon, trying to figure out how to make it ticks in the time of war. Like, I'm reminded of a quote from another character in the Stormlight Archive that said, look, war is the perfect time to change things and upset things because everything else is being changed, so why not end slavery? Anyways, very interesting, similar characters, those two. I mean, not completely, because one is, and the other is whatever. Spoilers, but that would be an interesting comparison video. Her and Zomi, like, I love the parallel, the interesting parallels between their stories and how they eventually came together. And just science. I love the science. The science was great. And the formations with the airships, great. But I'm getting off track here. Let's talk about Fyro. So, Fyro, I feel like we didn't get that much of him. But we are going to get a bunch of him in the next book because you have the Veiled Throne. He's on the throne. He has to wear the veil. And he's very poor at hiding his emotions, I think. I think that's what it was. But he was kind of essentially sidelined for the last half of the book. Like, he was poorly trying to put down the rebellion, and then the last half he's just like, I'm trying to get there and I'm trying to help, but he was kind of sidelined, which was kind of sad. But like, there's so many things going on, like, it's not surprising. So essentially with Fyro, it's just like, I think he has potential to be a really great and fleshed out character, but we're not going to see that until next month. And I say next month, but I really mean like in a few days once I actually like read the book. The next person we're going to talk about real quick is Farah. Again, I like Fyro. I think she has an interesting base for interesting places to jump off from, but we're not going to see that until next book. And then the sadness that is Rosanna. I am sad that she is dead, and I wish that she had not been dead, but I understand Gia's logic way too much, but there were other options. Just talk and decide to always be true to each other because of your dead husband or something. Like, Gia, there were other options. Why'd you have to do it? I also kind of wish that she had gotten away and just taken Fyro and gone to the hills, and maybe then Thera could have stayed, because I kind of wish Thera had stayed, because it would have been great. I would have loved to see Thera and Gia just kind of going head to head a little bit, or maybe just developing that respect for each other. But alas, nobody can actually state what their feelings are and try to come up with an alternate solution, evidently. Talk about emotionally stunted. And the last person we're going to talk about is Timu. Timu is such a tragic character. I think initially I was very annoyed with him, even after the incident. I'm not sure if I can actually, like, the algorithm will penalize me if I say the word, but essentially I didn't appreciate what I saw as Stockholm Syndrome, essentially, afterwards. He was just like, we can make peace or whatever. But it's interesting because the whole, hey, we can make peace and resolve our differences peacefully, was another theme in a character in another book, The Air War by Adrian Tchaikovsky, that I recently finished as well. They both had characters that, while in the middle of or around a war, were kind of like, hey, what if he just, didn't fight and decided to do things peacefully and come to an accord? And everybody was like, nah, shut up. So I feel like I have a little bit more sympathy because it hit me twice. And of course, the live show, we talked about Timu a little bit, and that kind of gave me a little bit more, a little bit more appreciation for his character. He was put in an impossible situation, and he's simply trying to do the best that he can. And the best that he can is trying to sue for peace, because that, preserves him and his child and the people of Dara at the same time. So I have a little bit more respect for him. And I have heard that I believe he has a little bit more page time in the next book as well. We're gradually focusing more and more on the children, which is great. So I think that's all I'm going to talk about today. I probably could talk about this for another hour or so, just rambling on specific other topics, but I touched on some of the major ones like Cooney and the Great Examination. If you like this video, of course, like it. Definitely put your thoughts down below. Be aware there are people watching this video for the non-spoiler part probably, so be careful with spoilers in the comments, if you will. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Again, I say that a lot, I guess, at the end. Make sure to get some rest because it's super, super helpful and super, super needed. Have a great rest of your day.